Hey everybody, welcome to another lesson of learning Japanese. Today our topic is the particle toka. So toka, like I just said, is a particle, and in most cases it should just be something simple to learn. It most usually just translates to and it's used to list nouns indefinitely, but we're gonna go kind of into the specifics of this particle and find out what it's used for less often as well. And so our topic toka today is going to cover a lot of its usages. Among them are listing nouns indefinitely, but also listing verbs indefinitely. It can even list adjectives indefinitely, but we probably won't go too much into that one. Toka can also be used to be a quotation marker. It can also be used to soften your statements, and it can also be used for some other things that I'm probably forgetting, but we'll go into. So yeah, let's get started on toka, the particle toka. Okay, sorry to state things over and over again, but like I said, toka is most usually going to appear after nouns, and it most usually appears to list nouns indefinitely. And so in this case, when it's being used in this way, people will usually just interpret it as meaning and. So noun and another noun and another noun. But more specifically, its translation is more like such things as, or among other things, or etc. And that is admittedly a very drastic different definition from just simply the conjunction and. So from the get-go here, let's provide an example of how toka is used in its most common occurrences. So our line that we're going to present here is going to be a very simple line. It's going to be Ramen toka osushi toka ga suki desu. And so if you didn't know already, this line is going to translate to I like things such as ramen and sushi. And notice how here I said I like things such as ramen and sushi as opposed to just saying I like ramen and sushi, which would probably what most people would say if they were fairly naturalizing this line. They would just say I like ramen and sushi, not I like things such as ramen and sushi. And so to better understand the function of toka, what we're going to do is try to key in on that difference right there. The difference between ramen and sushi and things such as ramen and sushi. And so here we see that toka is going to be implicating that this list of things that you like goes on indefinitely. So I like things such as ramen and sushi. The things there is kind of an indefinite list of other things. Additionally here, the usage of the particle toka is going to imply that the list here has a theme to it. So we notice that ramen and sushi are both foods. So what we can assume here is that because toka is here, the things such as ramen and sushi are also going to be other kinds of food. We're not going to have, say, like a CD player in that list out of nowhere. I like ramen and sushi and a CD player. That wouldn't make too much sense. So toka here is implying that the rest of the items in the indefinite list are also food. So there's a theme to the list, and it goes on indefinitely is what toka is kind of presenting here, as opposed to just I like ramen and sushi, which is just end there. That's the end of the list. And so by way of this, we can see that toka actually resembles another grammar pattern that we have covered before, which is the usage of the particle yaw, which translates to and basically, combined with the usage of the other particle nado to imply that the list of your and noun and noun goes on indefinitely. If you haven't watched that video yet, check it out. We'll include a link in the description and probably an annotation right here. So ya, nado is pretty much identical to toka here. There are some differences. Probably the main one that you can tell just from the start is that when we're using toka, we're only using one particle, toka, over and over again, presented for after each noun that we use in the list. For ya and nado, we have to use ya after each noun, then nado at the end of the last noun. If we only used ya without the nado, it would be more in line with that misconception of a translation that we were talking about. If you just use ramen ya sushi ga suki desu, that's just going to be I like ramen and sushi. There's no implication of the list going on and it being of other foods. But you add that nado in there to make it indefinite listing, and on the other hand, you could use the particle that is the topic of this video, toka, instead. And in mentioning that, actually, the other difference between toka and ya and nado together is that toka is considered more conversational, more casual, so you use it when you're talking to friends. Ya and nado are the more kind of natural and normal one to use. And now we move on to the main difference between toka and ya/nado, and that's that toka can actually be used with verbs and adjectives as well as nouns, while ya and nado are restricted to just nouns. So now let's talk about using toka with verbs. So if we're using toka with verb words, it's going to be, again, just listing them indefinitely. As we saw when we were talking about nouns with toka, we noticed that ya/nado is kind of the equivalent grammar pattern to that. Here, if we're using toka with verbs, there is also another grammar pattern that is identical to this usage, and that is the usage of the tari form. And so once again, we have actually covered the tari form as well, so we're going to include the link to that in the description and annotation right here, because it is essentially identical to using toka with verbs, except for, again, the fact that toka usage is more conversational/casual, tari is the more kind of natural normal one. And so yeah, again, when you're using toka with verbs or using the tari form, it's basically just listing verbs. And so we're going to give an example, and we'll use both of these grammar patterns for the same example, and they're essentially identical is the thing that we should keep in mind here, except for toka is the more conversational one. Okay, so for our example sentence here, what we're going to do is we're going to provide the tari version of it first, and note here that this is going to be the same example sentence that we actually used in the tari video that we published already on this channel. So we might not break it down as much, but if you need a better breakdown, that should probably be a good one for you. Just refer back to the tari video and get the breakdown there. So for our example sentence, the tari version, once again, we have 週末にテレビを見たり、ゲームをしたり、友達と一緒に食べたりします. And this is going to translate to, on the weekends, I watch television, play games, and eat with my friends. Basically, what you just need to note here is that the three verbs we're using, miru, gameをする, and taberu, are going to be conjugated into their tari form. So miru turns into mitari, game o suru turns into game o shitari, and taberu turns into tabetari. And then at the end, once we finish listing our list of verbs, we add the doing verb suru right after it and conjugate that into whatever conjugation it needs to be conjugated into to make our point, what we're trying to say. In this case, the suru is going to be conjugated into shimasu because that's kind of the present form conjugation, but it also is kind of the habitual action conjugation. So it's saying on the weekends I do this, this, and this, and that's kind of a habitual action because it's kind of something that I do every weekend. And so now when we present the toka version of that, what we're going to do is we're going to leave these verbs that we're using, miru, game o suru, and taberu, in their dictionary form, so no change at all. And then we just add the particle toka right after them when they appear. So our example sentence then is going to be 週末にテレビを見るとか、ゲームをするとか、友達と一緒に食べるとかします. And so we see here that it's essentially identical to the tari form, except for the conjugation of the verbs. Instead of conjugating them into their tari form, we just add toka after their dictionary form. Then again, at the end of the list, we see that we have to have the suru as well in the toka version, as well as the tari version, and it's just going to be conjugated into shimasu because, again, it denotes habitual action. The one thing that we do kind of have to note here, in case you missed it, is that toka appears after every single verb in the list. When we were talking about toka with nouns, the toka after the last noun in the list was actually optional, but here, when we're using it with verbs, it has to appear after every single verb because of that last suru that appears after the last toka that's conjugated into whatever you want it to. So yeah, toka has to appear after every single verb in your indefinite list when you're using it with verbs. So with that, we are now done talking about toka in the sense of it indefinitely listing things such as nouns, verbs. We didn't quite cover adjectives, even though it is certainly possible, but just because it doesn't have, it doesn't present too many exceptions or things to make note of. It's basically just the same thing. So what we're going to do next is we're going to take a look at toka in other ways that it's used, and these are going to be more casual and colloquial usages of the particle. And so let's backtrack and once again define what toka kind of means literally. It doesn't quite mean and, more so it means along the lines of as such, or some things like, or etc. And so while these kind of phrases of translations or words kind of give you the idea that they belong when you're listing things like we've covered already, such as blank, 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 etc., it kind of implies that you listed a bunch of things already. It doesn't necessarily have to be only in a list. Sometimes when you say, or something like that, or such things as, you can be saying that right after one word, not a list of things. And so for our next topic for toka here, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of interpret it as the English phrasing or something. So in English, when you say or something after a word, that word can be something singular. And to provide an example, say you walk into your apartment or something and you see your roommate studying. In this pretty casual, friendly situation, you might say something along the lines of, looks like you're studying an awful lot. Do you have a test tomorrow or something? And so that usage of or something there is actually going to qualify what toka is used for in Japanese as well. In this case, it's being added onto this singular statement to kind of add a sense of uncertainty to your statement, as if you're asking a question almost, or kind of expecting someone to clarify what you said. So then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take that line we just said in English, looks like you're studying an awfully lot, do you have a test tomorrow or something? And we're gonna turn that into Japanese with the usage of toka. So for our Japanese version of that line, we have 随分勉強しているようだね。明日試験があるとか. And again, this is gonna translate to, looks like you're studying an awfully lot, do you have a test tomorrow or something? So let's break down this sentence bit by bit to see how this is working. First up, we just have the word 随分. And so the word 随分 is actually going to be an adverb that kind of translates to extremely or considerably. In our translation, we have awfully. And as an adverb, it's going to be modifying the verb action that follows, and that's going to be benkyou suru, which is the verbal noun to study. Here, the suru is going to be conjugated into its te form, so shite, and then it's going to be added with iru to mean is studying, basically. Then we add on the word yo, which is going to translate to kind of appearance of or looks like. So benkyou shiteiru yo, and that's going to be looks like you're studying. Then we have the da to end the sentence with the copula. Then we have the sentence ending particle ne, just to kind of seek agreement to that statement. Looks like you're studying an awful lot. And so that's the first sentence in the line. Our second line now is going to include the word toka, and so let's see how this is going on. First up, we have the word ashita, which we've used plenty of times already in previous videos. This word is going to translate to tomorrow. Right after that, we have the word shiken, which has also been used a couple of times in our videos. That's going to translate to test. Then we have the grammar pattern ga aru, which was used before, not only in previous videos, but just a few minutes ago in this video. And ga aru is going to mean essentially to have or to be. So do you have a test tomorrow is what this is saying. Then we end the sentence with just toka. And so like I said, toka is going to kind of translate to or something, and it's going to appear at the end of the sentence just like or something would appear at the end of the English sentence. So once again, altogether the line reads as 随分勉強しているようだね。明日試験があるとか, and that's going to mean looks like you're studying an awful lot. Do you have a test tomorrow or something? And so again, notice how we're not using toka after one verb, another verb, or one noun, another noun, another noun. It's just going to be added onto this singular statement of you have a test tomorrow to essentially kind of add an aspect of uncertainty to it. Looks like you're studying an awful lot. Do you have a test tomorrow or something? So let's do another example of this where toka is being used to kind of add uncertainty or to soften the statement. And what we're going to do is we're going to provide another common English utterance and give the Japanese identical of it, which coincidentally enough, not quite coincidental because it's not a coincidence, involves toka. So let's get a common English line. When you're trying to ask somebody out, sometimes you'll kind of be not too pushy and you'll ask them if they already have a boyfriend or girlfriend yet. So what you're going to do is you're going to say, do you have a boyfriend or anything? And of course here, that or anything at the end is kind of softening your statement. And so in Japanese, we can essentially do the exact same thing with the usage of toka. And so our identical Japanese sentence will just be kareshi toka iru, and this is going to mean quite literally, do you have a boyfriend or anything? If we take a look at the actual wording, we just have kareshi, which literally translates to boyfriend. We have toka, which is going to translate to or something, such as, in this case, we're going to naturalize it to or anything, and then iru is going to mean to be. So is there a boyfriend or anything? And that's going to more naturally turn into the English, do you have a boyfriend or anything? Okay, so we are now going to move on to our last part of this lesson, so to speak. So what we just covered was using toka to kind of mean or something to the thing that you added it onto. What happens if this something that you added it onto happens to be a quote? So to give an English example, he said you were a piece of crap or something like that. Or something is referring to you are a piece of crap, and that's a quote right there, but perhaps you didn't remember exactly what he said, so that's a kind of paraphrase quote, so you add or something to kind of signify that there's an amount of uncertainty to the actual quoting. It's probably something along those lines, but he didn't word for word say you are a piece of crap. And so when those coincidences come to a line, you're saying or something to something, and that something also happens to be a quote. In Japanese, toka is still going to be used, but here the little extra detail that we need to note is that toka is actually going to function as the quotation particle for that quote as well. So usually when we're quoting something, we'll use the quoting particle to. If it's casual, maybe we'll use te. But here toka, if toka is being used, you don't have to add that extra to or that extra te. It's just going to be toka being used instead. So to kind of materialize that idea, let's give just one example sentence of that. So for our example sentence, we have the line 両親が大嫌いとか言ってるけど本当にそう思う. And so what this line is going to translate to is you're saying things like how much you hate your parents, but do you really feel that way? So first up, let's just break down the sentence word by word. First up, we have 両親, which is going to translate to parents. Right after 両親, we have が大嫌い, and this is going to mean to hate. It's going to mean to hate the word that appears before が大嫌い, which was 両親. So, 両親が大嫌い is going to mean hate parents. This is basically the opposite of the ga suki grammar pattern, which means to like or to love. Kirai is going to mean to basically hate or to not like. Then we actually add on that dai right in front of it to mean really hate or really not like. So to hate, hate parents is the idea here, but don't do that actually. And so 両親が大嫌い is actually going to be the quote that we're going to use in here. So that person said, he hates his parents. And so what we're going to do is we're going to quote him, hate parents. But what we're actually going to want to do is kind of say things like, I hate my parents. So things like that quote. And so in order to do that in Japanese, instead of just quoting him and doing the quotation particle to or te, we're going to quote him with the particle toka instead to mean things like that. So you say things like you hate your parents. 両親が大嫌いとか言ってる. And here 言ってる is going to be the te form of the verb you, which means to say, plus the ru added onto it to be is saying or you are saying basically. Then the rest of the sentence is kedo, which means but. Then hontoni, which means really. Then to end the sentence, so omo. So is going to mean that way. Omo is going to mean, of course, to think or to feel. So do you really feel that way? But do you really feel that way? You say things like you hate your parents, but do you really feel that way? 両親が大嫌いとか言ってるけど本当にそう思う. And so yeah, the main idea here is to note how when we're using toka, it's going to be replacing the to or the te to mark the quotation, as well as not simply directly quoting him, but saying things such as that quote. So what follows would usually be the particle to or te to mark it as a quotation, but here again, the special topic or the thing to keep in mind here is that we're using the particle toka instead. And so yeah, that's going to be our final example to the final subtopic in this big topic of the particle toka. And with that, we are going to wrap up this video lesson. Hopefully you learned a thing or two, hopefully actually a lot of things, because we did talk about a lot of things, and this has once again been coverage of the particle toka to list nouns indefinitely in the same manner as the grammar pattern ya, nado, lists verbs indefinitely in the same manner as the tari grammar pattern, and then as well some casual usages, some colloquial usages of the particle toka to kind of mean the English or something, and it's used to kind of imbue your words with a sense of uncertainty or make it softer, your statement softer, depending on what kind of context you need to use it in. And yeah, that's gonna cover it for this lesson. Stay tuned for the next lesson of learning Japanese.